Greetings. This is TK Trav, aka Travis Magus, here with LVX777. Today we're going to talk about energy. Let me know if the volume is just right or if the music is too loud. Peace to everybody here so far. 40 shot Courser Cover, peace. Alicia M, peace and good to see you. The Mental Goddess, peace, peace. Oath, Ohinanana, peace. Lance Benefield, peace and greetings. Manipulation of the life force. Today we're going to talk about energy, and this is important, especially considering magical work and how it requires energy in order to be performed. But it isn't just magical work. Energy is the center of our lives. It has everything to do with how we feel, it has everything to do with the states that we enter into. It has everything to do with what we're capable of, whether or not we reach our dreams, or whether or not we live. And like all things, it's extremely important to have a working definition before we get into discussion on the topic. I think a lot of people run with the buzzword or the accepted generalization, and it's easier to communicate that way. But for maximum understanding, it's always best to challenge your definitions of the words that you use, especially before you get into any kind of debate or argument, because most of the time people aren't even arguing or debating about the same things. The words sound the same, but the definitions are different. So energy. If you want to get really simple and basic, we can say that energy is the force that allows us to act, to perform, to move. Without energy, there is no movement. The ancient Vedic texts refer to this as prana in one word. And there's other words for this, but essentially this is the force that allows us to move, to perform. Whether that's performance on the physical plane, performance on the astral plane, or even performance in the mental plane. Now, energy, in whatever form it operates in, has the ability of being moved, being pushed, or being pulled. And every single day we are engaged in this process. This isn't something that you have to read a book to learn, because we all do it every day. What does have to be learned is how to do it consciously, how to do it exceptionally, so that we can get exactly the results that we want. For example, when you deal with people in your day-to-day lives, there's an energy exchange. You're being siphoned from, you're also taking from, right? So it goes both ways. Sometimes you are acting as the vampire, other times you are acting as the victim. But it's happening all over the world. And to really understand how this process works, it's going to help to, like I said, define how the energy exists within us. And this was inspired by a certain line in the book that we're reading, The Magician is Training in Purpose. And the line that he stated was that all magical operations begin from within and they're pushed outward. All magical operations start within and they're pushed outward. And I've spoken many times about my framework on what it means to be a successful magus, to get repeated positive results. And one of those 5 frameworks deals with energy manipulation. Those 5 frameworks, of course, if you do recall, because I've been talking about this for a month now. Ontology, which is the lay of the land, understanding that there is a dual aspected reality of consciousness and matter. Next would be the methodology, which involves my 7 principles that I've mentioned several times. The principle of correspondence, the principle of consistency, the principle of clarity of purpose, resonance versus dissonance, useful and appropriate, context and content, state control. The third would be authority, and this is knowing who and what you are and your relation to the universe that you inhabit. The fourth being communication, and this is everything about having a symbolic representation of these forces at work, these energies at work. You can't handle them effectively, consciously, if you don't have an inner representation of these energies. All magical works begin within and they're pushed outward. And of course, the fifth principle of this is energy manipulation. And this has everything to do with understanding the etheric plane and what that is. This has everything to do with understanding what your chakras are and why they're important, how they relate to you and how they relate to the outside world. It also has to do with understanding how to go into trance and what to do with going into trance. We're always in trance states. It's just you want to put yourself in the trance states that are useful and appropriate to you. Energy manipulation also deals with balancing the energy, building up the energy, and sending out the energy. When these things are understood, you can rightly say that you are doing energy work. Like I mentioned before, we're all doing this all the time, but when it's intentional, that's what makes it most important. Building up the energy and sending out the energy. When these things are understood, when it's done intentionally, this is when it is most important. This is when you're actually doing a magical practice. Peace, Veronica. How are you?
Hi, Travis. How are you?
Doing fairly well.
That's good to know.
Peace to the Honorable J. Peace, Pork Hill. Framestar Films. Peace, peace, brother. Koi Sewell. Peace, peace. Papa Flan. Greetings. Rick, greetings. He says Theron Q. Dumont, aka William Walker Atkinson. Yeah, great author. So, speaking about energy manipulation, okay, this is something that must be mastered if you want to have repeated successful results. MC Maestro, peace, peace. So, let's talk about energy and where it comes from and how you can manipulate this. We have these different scenarios in life. You may be having a terrible day. You wake up and nothing seems to go right. You're late. You're on your lunch break and the line is super long at the restaurant you're supposed to go to. Maybe you left your wallet. Boss is mad at you. Girlfriend or boyfriend is mad at you. Things just happen to fall apart all day and you go to bed pissed off. You woke up pissed off and you go to bed pissed off, right? The energy is low, we can say. We can say the energy is kind of fucked. And then we have another scenario where you wake up with a great feeling. You're speaking good about yourself. You're speaking good into the world. You happen to be lucky. You find a $20 bill on the ground. Perhaps something that you've been working on gets noticed by somebody influential. And there's talks of moving forward with the assistance that you need. And you go to bed feeling good about yourself. Now, we can say the energy is high there. Now, here's where these two situations are the exact same. In the first scenario, you wake up and the world around you is showing you symbols that you don't necessarily agree with. So you match the energy, as they say. You meet the energy and you reflect it. On the other hand, when we're dealing with the good day and you find that $20 bill on the ground and you get the assistance that you need from maybe the investors or the partners or whatever, things are looking good. And because things are looking good, you match that energy and you feel good. Right now, that might not sound like anything's wrong with that. And really, in terms of right or wrong, there is nothing wrong with that. But where these two scenarios are exactly the same is that the individual is being affected by the outside world. The soul, the mind, is mimicking and mirroring and responding to Prakriti, to nature, to the matrix. And in that moment, who's in control? When the world around you is dictating how you're supposed to feel, who's in control? If you wake up and you have a terrible day and you respond to that by feeling terrible, who's in control? Who's regulating your energy? When you wake up and you have a great day and things are going well and you match that and start to feel good, who and what is regulating your energy? It's certainly not you. Allow me to rephrase. It is you, but you're giving and submitting the authority to the outside world. Where this can be a problem is that the outside world, if known for nothing else, is known for being fluctuating, chaotic, and unstable. Tomorrow is unpredictable. In fact, the next 5 seconds is unpredictable, according to the outside world. Now, there's another way to do things. There is a way to have your mind set on the type of energy that you are going to have. And regardless of what happens in the outside world, you can decide what type of energy you're going to have. Now, yeah, it's more difficult than the first two scenarios. The first two scenarios are easy, and everybody does it. Everybody matches the energy to the outside world. If somebody comes and yells at you because they're pissed off, now you get pissed off and start yelling, and now your day is ruined. You've allowed it to go that way. Or somebody says something wonderful to you. You might get a text about how awesome you are, and that may make you feel really good. But understand that you have given the keys, you've given the command to an outside force, to an outside entity. And if we continue to build a habit of allowing the world to dictate how we're supposed to feel, you're in for a bumpy ride. You can look around at the of people and how they act as a whole. You'll quickly understand the effects of allowing the world to tell you how you're supposed to feel and act. Right now, there are people telling us that we're supposed to be upset about a certain conflict, and we're supposed to choose a side. You're supposed to choose a side on this said conflict. Whereas 5 days ago, this was not even in your mind. This has nothing to do with you, right? But today somebody's telling you how you're supposed to feel. Notice how quickly the masses jump into that. Notice how quickly. It doesn't take much. And it's not that this particular scenario is different, because after this scenario, there will be another scenario telling you how you're supposed to feel, to pick and choose a side. Just like before this scenario, there was one not long ago, and before that there was something, right? It never ends. The world will always have and always provide you with something to keep your energy regulated and controlled and predictable. One of the best ways to do that is to cause a polarity, a war between groups, right? You got your war between the vaxxed and the unvaxxed. Remember that? People unfriending and unfollowing and physically fighting over their opinions and views over a side that they were supposed to choose. This is a trap of energy harvesting, because somebody profits off of that, and it's not you. Somebody profits off of these dichotomies, these battles, these wars, these choosing of sides, no matter what form it comes in, regardless of what form it comes in. Someone else is profiting off of it. Black Lives Matter versus Blue Lives Matter versus All Lives Matter. Because we have this desire to express our energy as human beings, when someone provides a pre-packaged way for us to express that energy, it's easy. Just like waking up, having a bad day, and feeling bad. Just like waking up and somebody yelling at you, now you want to yell. When there's a pre-packaged delivery, you will have a expected response. That's not free will. It's not free will. So speaking of the inner need to express that energy, I mentioned earlier that this particular level of the framework deals with the chakras. We have these 7 points within, and they're not literally physically within your body. They are what we see drawn as these colored circles and these colored wheels. They are the representations of types of forces, types of pressure that is universally exerted. There's a universal collection of energies that influences everything. Now, this comes from the fact that consciousness, the soul, when it comes into contact with matter, it starts to build specific reactions. And the very first reaction that comes into existence is the survival instinct. And this survival instinct may be expressed in any manner of way, but ultimately this root chakra symbolizes this universal pressure to survive, this universal pressure to continue to exist. And everyone and everything that lives shares this type of energy. Ashley B says, needed to hear this. Peace, Ashley B. Magical Magician, peace. JD says, Tao Te Ching does a great job this going with the exterior flow. Yes. Framestar Film says, ground control, divide and conquer. Absolutely. And a scattered mind is not a threat. The Magical Magician says, my soul is happy and at peace. Calix says, what is the music in the background? Smile. Rorola says, after a certain age, you see the same patterns in humanity. I'm too tired to play into it like I did in my youth, because the shit is just the same. Exactly. Patterns. So every living thing shares and exhibits this energy to survive, this will to survive. That's the root chakra. And the fact that every living thing exhibits this means that every living thing is subject to be manipulated by that shared expression. So when that will to survive is threatened, or when there's an opportunity for it to be enhanced, we will respond to it accordingly and immediately. The same way that if you narrowly miss a car accident, or you may see something like if somebody pulls out a gun, right? Immediately that energy expression of the will to survive kicks in, and every type of energy that's stacked on top of it becomes overridden, right? This is how the chakras work. There's these layers of energy, right? So you've got this existence, the soul that's here in the material plane. Wrapped around it is this root chakra. Wrapped around it is this will to survive. And wrapped around it is another type of energy. That's the sacral chakra, the creative chakra. And wrapped around it is another type of energy, another type of consciousness, and it continues. This is how we operate. More evolved beings have more layers. Less evolved and more simple beings only have that root layer. And now the root layer is to be taken seriously because the other layers are founded on top of it. So if there is a threat to the root layer, all the other layers are overridden, right? The only way that this can be changed is if an individual is working from the heart chakra or above, because that's when you begin to transition your focus of existence from the material body to the soul itself. If you're focused on the soul itself, you are less likely to be influenced by perceived threats or fears to the human body. This is why fear is the easiest way to manipulate life. This is why the fear energy, or a threat to survival, is the easiest way to control an organism. Because at the root level, a living being will do anything to maintain its existence. So we are constantly bombarded by threats to our safety and our security. The powers that govern life on this planet study these patterns as well. And it's well understood in business and sales, as well as in control of populations, and even music and fashion and any industry that human beings are involved with. It's well understood that fear is the number one motivator. Fear of or threat to survival, number one motivator. Now, the layer that's wrapped around this root chakra, the layer that's wrapped around this survival energy, is this creative potential, which is commonly expressed as sexual expression, which is sexual desire. It could be fantasy, it could be the fulfillment of sexual needs. It can also be the creation of art. It can also be the admiration of art. But this goes from the basic level of just survival to the next level of enjoying life, of enjoying existence, of pleasure. And because this is so close to the root level, this is the second easiest way to manipulate life force, to speak to and affect that energy. Because just like a person can be easily controlled when they are in fear of their safety, a person can also be easily controlled when they're given objects of desire. If a person has a particular fantasy about an individual, and that fantasy is very strong, that person is controlled by that figure, by that subject. You're controlled by it. Likewise, if somebody desires objects, fancy things, you desire a certain accessory, a bag or a watch or a car, an award. When you place your desire intensely towards something, you can easily run the risk of being controlled by that thing, regardless of there being a reality of you achieving it or not. These forces are extremely powerful because they override logic. They override logic. This is how a person can start up an OnlyFans and make tons of money, because people that are paying this money are placing that desire towards that individual, whether or not it can actually be fulfilled. JD says, Kali Yuga time, heavy. So wise to prepare for death and acceptance of it. Absolutely. JD says, death equals permanent, ego death, the root of all fear. We grow natural family, peace. Daphne Laura Mill, peace, peace. Christian Black, peace. JD says, the thing is, left hand is all about ego preservation, so fear is your friend, and the left hand practitioner masters over fear, pain, etc. The reverse is spiritual ascendance. So we're talking about these different layers of how energy is expressed in the manifest dimension. Keep in mind, though, this is a pattern that living creatures must obey, must submit to. But this is not absolute existence. This is actually why they call this conditioned consciousness. Because when consciousness enters the realm of time and space, it begins to take on conditions in order for it to manifest. Consciousness is expansive, it's unlimited, it's it's an entirely different dimension than this. Consciousness is not bound by any form or by any force. It is pure existence. There isn't even any ego. There is no I am. It's isness is what they call it, isness. But when that condenses itself into matter, into the material plane, into the existing dimension, it must shave off aspects of itself. It must condense itself into some form. And the more dense you get, the more compacted, compressed, and limited consciousness appears to be. So when I say more dense, what I mean is when it comes down into these planes, into these layers of existence, when it comes down into the mental plane, it must become an idea, it must become a concept, it must become a constellation of thought things, right? So notice how we go from pure consciousness, absolute unconditioned consciousness, which is unlimited, to becoming something specific. That's the first condition, becoming something specific. This is the mental plane. Now within that group of thoughts, we can say philosophers, right? We can say that there's a group of thoughts. Think of like territories and countries. Let's imagine that there's this giant country in the mental plane full of people who like to understand information and share information, or not even people who, but collection of ideas that deal with philosophy, right? If you go down to the next plane, which is the astral plane, what starts to happen is that within that country of philosophy, you start to get certain emotions, states, and feelings that are associated with these ideas. So these may be political ideas, these may be musical concepts, these may be movements, groups of people, or even activities and behaviors of animals, right? And the emotions behind them. What's happening here now is that this unlimited consciousness shaves off pieces of itself to become thought forms, which then shaves off pieces of itself to become emotional responses. And that shaving down continues until there's physical manifestation, which is the lowest and slowest vibration, the lowest density. And this lowest density is easily moved by emotions and thoughts. So everything that exists comes under the rulership of this conditioning. And some people symbolize this conditioning as the demiurge, or some type of ruling power that prevents you from moving forward. And you can do that if you'd like. But this existence that we have here is not the end-all be-all. It isn't absolute consciousness. So what we strive for is understanding more and more what an experience is like with unconditioned consciousness, to find our own soul. Everything that exists is an expression of the one soul. Everything that exists, whether organic or inorganic, anything that has a form or anything that is a force is an expression of the one soul. In fact, nothing can exist unless it is an expression of the one soul. Even the material plane in its entirety is an expression of the one soul. So it would be erroneous, gravely erroneous, to say that someone or something doesn't have a soul. Even rocks are an expression of the soul. The Age of Divine Jewel piece. Four Cats Tarot piece. Christian Black says, peace. I heard you speak on how evolution in the scientific physical sense is the realization that one and one's descendancy won't put up with it anymore. That one really hit me. Yeah, when I first read that, it really hit me too. And it's true, right? Because I think that a lot of us have gotten to that point where facing certain obstacles, trials and tribulations, and not wanting that anymore. I think that all creatures come to that point. Perhaps there's that survival drive that exists at the root of all living things. Perhaps when that survival drive is pushed far enough, it forces consciousness to evolve to the next level. Perhaps that's why we open up these higher chakras, because we understand that the only other option is more of the same. So you can have more of the same suffering, or you can have evolution. And isn't that the case? You have your choice of more of the same or evolution. So the first layer that wraps around our existence is the will to survive. As we further evolve, we get this next layer, which is the will to express creation, to enjoy the pleasures of life. And these two are very, very commonly manipulated in human beings, and even in animals too. This is why a big part of human culture has always been sexuality. This is why sex sells, because when we see things that trigger the sexual response within us, it overrides logic. Specifically in people who haven't developed themselves, who haven't done any mental conditioning for themselves, people who are just left to their own devices, who haven't done any type of self-work. It's very easy to be manipulated through fear and threats to our survival and sexual things. So you'll see that the music nowadays is extremely sexually charged. You'll see that the media, movies, and all types of media is extremely sexual charged. It's because these are control mechanisms. We go into a certain trance state when these energies are stimulated within us. When the threat of our safety is triggered, we're put into a trance. When the sexual desire is stimulated, we're put into a trance. And depending on what trance you're in at any given time, this literally determines what you can and what you cannot do. There's things that you can and cannot do when you're feeling certain kind of ways. When you are terrorized, when you're deeply in fear, there's things that you cannot do in that state. When you're overwhelmed with sexual desire, there's things that you cannot do in that state. This is why these things are control mechanisms. So wrapped around the layer of pleasure is the layer of connection on a social level. We can call it the herd mentality, or we can call it human nature, the social nature. And this is the desire that we all have to connect, to feel as if we're understood, to feel like we have a connection with someone, be it a group or even just another individual. And this one sits on top of simply the sexual need. It's not so much gratification of that. It's a higher level of gratification, dealing with the ego, dealing with the personality. The need to connect with another person. And for those who don't have this particular energy expressed within their lives, or don't have an outlet of expression for this, these types of people are easily manipulated as well. Because again, when we desire something deeply, it has a certain tendency to rule over our behaviors and our actions. And the higher up you go with these, the more variations there are of expressing these. So while somebody might get their social needs satisfied by taking care of someone, another person might get their social need gratified by showing off their possessions, or showing that they have power in the social sphere, or showing that they have talent and being appreciated that way, or even using their talent to help other people. There's different ways of expressing the social need. For most people at the basic level, it's just being a part of a group. It's just being a part of a collection of other people under a certain banner of ideas. So you can start to see how easy it is to manipulate this level. Now, these three levels are active. These three chakras, these three energy centers are active in all people. These are three for certain are active in all people. The other four take more direct effort to begin to stimulate and activate. So these three types of energy, these three energy streams are active in everyone. The other four take effort to unlock and open up. So notice what I said in the beginning. I talked about somebody having a bad day, somebody having a good day. And this was actually the same thing, because these two individuals were allowing the outside world to tell them how to express their energy. So a person is having a bad day, people are yelling at them, ready to fight. So that triggers them to respond in that same way, to want to fight, to want to yell back. Before they weren't doing that, but they've been manipulated into doing that because the outside world instructed them on how they were supposed to feel. The same way the person has a good day is instructed to feel good because things look good. And what I propose is that the way to begin the process of manipulating and mastering energy movement, first within yourself before others, because sure, you can do it to others, but when you're talking about a level of mastery, you've got to be able to do it to yourself and for yourself on a consistent, successful basis. In order to start that path and start that process, you have to begin the art of non-attachment and understand that how you feel is to be regulated by yourself, within yourself first. If you do it that way, you change the outside world regardless of what's going on. When you set your mind to be a certain way, the outside world has no choice to respond to you, to change based on you. So there's power in this level of authority. There's power in managing and regulating your own energy, your own emotions, your own mindset. The other way, being affected by the environment, there's power in it, but it's not power that you control. You're literally giving your power to someone else. The same way that the media tells you that you should feel a certain way, you should choose a side, you should be angry at this person, you should cancel this person, you should praise this person. The world is telling you how you're supposed to react. You're literally giving your power away. Let's say, for example, I'm gonna make money if people choose to be against a certain idea, right? Because if they're against this certain idea, they're more likely to invest in certain things, certain products that maybe I produce. Or maybe there's people who produce products that will pay me if I make other people feel this way, if I influence people to feel this way, right? So usually when there's this situation going on in the media that's telling you how you're supposed to feel, there's somebody on the back end profiting off of that every time, because otherwise there wouldn't be a reason to report it to you. Many years ago, decades ago, maybe even centuries ago, the news was simply that. It was an outlet to share what's going on in the world without bias. Well, that changed a long time ago when it was understood that if people are controlled and directed, then this social level of existence can be manipulated. So the news stopped being a place of reporting the happenings of the world and started to become a propaganda machine. There's really no point in watching the news anymore. There really isn't, unless you enjoy that game. And some people do enjoy it, because like I said, if you don't have any other way to express your feelings, you can join in, watch the news, and allow them to dictate how you're supposed to feel. For most people, that's the way to do it. For most people, they need to be told what to do and how to feel. If you want proof of that, just observe the people in your life. Just observe the people around you. Just get on social media and scroll. Some people need this because they don't have that outlet of it. It's the same thing as a person who loves drama, right? There are some people, I don't know if you've ever met people who love to stir up trouble. The common response is because they don't have anything going on in their lives, so they start drama because it gives them excitement. It's the same thing with what we see happening in the news and on social media. There's a lot of people who don't know how to build their own excitement or to create their own emotions. So they depend on outside forces to show them and tell them how to feel. And that's perfectly fine for them. That's how their particular life is designed to be. But that's insufficient if you call yourself a magus, a magician, a witch, a source, whatever you want to call yourself. If you're somebody that's working with energy intentionally to understand the patterns of reality, then you can't play that game anymore, because things are going to become extremely uncomfortable. Ram, oh, peace. MC Maestro said 1500s Louis XIV had the news game on lock. Yeah, so that's a long time ago. Long time ago. And it all comes from an understanding of the patterns of human nature. You can't call it evil. You can't call it bad, because in his position you do the same thing. I promise you would. It's not necessarily corruption. It is another form of evolution. See, evolution happens on all levels. Evolution doesn't just happen on the physical level. The same way that the physical level begins to change to adapt to its environment, so does the emotional plane of existence, the astral plane. It adapts. So does the etheric plane. It evolves. The mental plane evolves. The different planes evolve because they are within time. Within time means that it cannot express itself in its entirety. Like I said before, consciousness is so expansive and so vast. In order for it to exist within time and space, it has to limit itself. So the time limitation means that it must move from point A to point B. The space limitation means that it must grow from point A to point B and then dissolve and then repeat the process. So ideas evolve, emotions evolve, the expression of these things evolve on the physical plane. To speak of unconditioned consciousness, this highest realm that we're talking about, whatever you want to call it, heaven, God, the soul, to speak about that level of existence, you've got to think outside of the boundaries of time and space, right? So at this level of soul, it's not a paradise that you're walking around barefoot on streets of gold. It's not this garden where you create your own reality. It is a space above and beyond all that. It's above and beyond all that. It's not creating your own tree of life in your own world. That's still within the matrix. You can only that's what the matrix is, this realm of creation. The soul exists in a place outside. The soul was never here, and it never will be here. What we have here is a reflection of the expression of the soul. And that reflection is perceived in everything, right? It's as if the soul is looking into the mirror, and the mirror is looking into a mirror, and then that mirror is reflecting back, and it's just going back and forth, getting more and more complex. The first exclamation of God is I am. I am is a different aspect of God than what God was before it said I am. That I am is a lower aspect of God. The Ehe, I am that I am. That is a lower vibration of God. That's not the pure God. God had to look at creation to say that. And to look at creation means it had to separate itself in order to observe itself. That's the first expression. That's the first path in the tree of life. That's the Fool card. And when you look at the tree of life and its infinite ability to convey esoteric meaning, you'll notice that within this upper triad, there's two particular paths. There's a path from Kether to Chakma, which is the Fool card, right? Stepping off the cliff. Uncertainty, great potential. Anything can happen at this point, right? Anything can happen. That's the Fool card. Whereas on the other side, you've got Kether connected to Bina, and this is represented by the magician, the Magus. Now there's a clear-cut difference between these two images. On one hand, you've got the Fool card. It's called the Fool, right? There's this person haphazardly walking along the edge of a cliff, and he's a split second away from joy or death, pleasure or pain. Anything goes at this point. Whereas the other card, the Magus, standing in front of that table with all of his materials, knowing exactly what he's doing, as above, so below, right? That card is a ritual in its entirety. He has everything necessary to not only understand the will of God, but also to perform the will of God. You've got these two separate paths. Just examining the images alone will tell you what's at the root of the left-hand path and the right-hand path. Now, you'll see that the Fool card is connected to Chakma. From Kether to Chakma, this is that expression of I am. This is that expression of unlimited consciousness being conditioned. We can think of a light bulb radiating outward. Now, what happens if you turn that radiation of light and you compress it all into one direction? You line up every photon particle, one behind the other. It becomes a laser, and it shoots forth with power. It shoots forth with so much power and intensity that anything that it comes into contact with will definitely be changed, right? That's the Fool card. That's Chakma that's Kether going to Chakma. Now, on the other side, represented by the Magus card, Kether going into Bina, what you have here is that unlimited, unconditioned consciousness. Again, it's being channeled, but here it's being channeled into specific forms. It's being channeled with intelligence, with conscious direction. It's being channeled in such a way that there's form, there's stability, there is structure. It's the difference. There's order and there's chaos. There's order and there's chaos. So what we have is that at the root of the left-hand path is order, and at the root of the right-hand path is chaos. Now, TikTok might tell you something different. But again, it's not about these buzzwords. It's not about these cool phrases. You got to understand what these words actually mean. Chaos doesn't mean evil, and it doesn't mean some bad place. It simply means force that is operating without any type of structure. So we find that the Magus is connected to the feminine polarity of existence. The feminine polarity of existence. And when we speak of the feminine polarity of existence, we're speaking about the womb of creation, the basis of all things, the basis of the expression of all things, the basis of the formulation of all things, the matrix itself. And when I say the matrix, it's not a movie and it's not a computer program. It is the substance that the four elements can operate within. This is the Akash. This is what we call the fifth element, the Akash. And that's located in Bina. According to the Vedic system that we've studied, that you studied, Bina and everything below it is Prakriti. Bina and everything below it is Prakriti. Whereas Purusha would be Chakma. Purusha would be Chakma. And then Kether, of course, would be the union of masculine and feminine, would be Brahma, would be the highest conception of God that we can put together. JD says survival 101 in this new age matrix gen. Control your own mind. Don't let them do it for you. Absolutely. Angelo Scott says, I personally feel the human experience is a figment of our imagination. There's something very inauthentic or illusory about this reality. Absolutely. Absolutely. And you feel that way because you can sense and perceive directly that everything in our life, well, most of the things in our lives are given to us in a very packaged manner, in a very structured, ordered manner. You're told what to like and you're told what to not like. You're told what to fantasize about. You're told what to aspire towards. You're told what kind of music to listen to and what music sounds good. You're told what's evil and what's bad. Now, if somebody's telling you and giving you a package saying, if you put this program in your computer, you'll understand what evil is. Well, if somebody created that program and there's money behind it, it isn't coming from a neutral perspective. It's coming from a biased perspective. They're telling you what to feel because it benefits them. And this is just the world that we live in today. There's nothing bad about it. You don't have to cast your judgment on it. Because remember, like I said before, if you allow the outside world to tell you how to feel, you're not in control. So understanding that this world is giving us pre-packaged ideas and concepts, when you realize that, the step isn't to, call these people evil and terrible and they're ruling the world and they're doing this, that, and the third. No, because you're still being influenced by them, just on a different level. The next step is to detach yourself from that entire game. You don't have to play it. You don't have to play it. You play it because you want to play it. But there's another option. So to have that feeling that the human experience is a figment of your imagination, you're exactly right. In fact, I agree with that. A very wise gentleman once said, human is a lie, and I agree with that. For that main reason, it's prepackaged. This is what culture is. Culture is this package that's given to us, telling you what you're supposed to think and how you're supposed to feel. Now, there is power behind that if you learn how to utilize it for your benefit, right? One of the greatest examples we had recently was the Black Lives Matter movement. Somebody designed a movement and told a specific group of people how to feel and made a whole lot of money off of that, and then went about his merry way. That's hijacking culture and using it to your benefit. People hijack entire music industries, right? Because the culture has no other thought process other than, this is the music I listen to, this is what good music is, and I'm going to invest my time, my attention, and my money in this. There's people who have taken that industry and they construct concepts and images and sounds with the agenda of making lots of money. Not because it's art, not because it's authentic, simply because they know that people will buy into it. Same thing with sports. We already talked about the news, right? And if these things are if all you know is manufactured and processed reality, then of course it feels inauthentic. Absolutely. The Mental Goddess says, I knew we was in the Matrix watching the BET Awards. They got crunk like Sexy Red was Stevie Wonder. Yeah. I stopped watching that stuff a very long time ago. But, if you have the eyes to see, you can see it with your own eye, your own third eye. It's not what it used to be. It's not what it used to be, and it won't be anymore. That time is over. That time is gone. It's time for something different. DKDF said something pretty important. He said, if chaos is order unrecognized, then everything is always in order, for lack of better words. Absolutely. JD says, here's what gives the fool his power. The subconscious mind can't control him. Nobody can. That's true. Capri, peace and welcome to the live stream. Framestar Film says, order out of chaos with study and practice, fool and magician united. Yes, and that's where we get the third path that is connected to Kether. There's 3 paths connected to Kether. The third path is the High Priestess. And what you find is that she sits at the entrance, at the gate, at the doorway to the mysteries, which is covered in a veil. And she holds the Book of Life in her lap. She's someone who understands both sides of the story. And she sits right in the middle. The middle path is extremely difficult because it requires an understanding of both sides and somewhat of a negation to choose. Thank you, MC Maestro. Hit this like button if you like this content. Don't just look at it. Tap it. Tap it as hard as you can. We have like almost half the likes ratio to people here. So I know if only 50% of people like this information, I don't know what you're here for. Can you guys hear that music? Is it too loud? MC Maestro says, music sounds like you're about to talk about Darth Plagueis the Wise. Love it. JD says the masters at the top are putting the world into purge mode. That's why. I don't know. I'm not there, so I can't predict their intentions. I don't think any of us know unless we're a part of that group. These people normally being studied in the occult, I'm sure they have reasons that are understandable, but I can't assume that I know what they are. I wouldn't say purge mode, but I'd definitely say something that would benefit their well-being. Something that would contribute to their continued existence. Because again, if you were there, you'd probably be making a similar decision. They know things that we don't know, so we cannot predict their intentions at all. We can guess though. Demetrius Freeland, peace. Peace. Demetrius Freeland says, awesome to hear your insights. Thank you. Tai Hey L, peace. Bizarre Cultivations, peace, peace. Caprice says, is the middle path a balance between the masculine and feminine energies? Absolutely. And it's very important to define what masculine and feminine energy means to you. It's important to understand what those two phrases mean beyond the physical sense, right? Masculine energy isn't toughness and muscles and penis. Feminine energy is not sexuality and breast and vagina. It goes a lot deeper than that, and it has to do with modes of energy, how this energy functions. As I mentioned before, in the very beginning of the stream, when you're speaking of energy, energy can either be pushed out or pulled in. And then there's a third option, which is balance, stasis, harmony of the two. Capri says conscious mind and subconscious mind. Yes. And see what we're describing here, whenever I say the energy flow or the sex organs, or you said conscious mind and subconscious mind, what we're dealing with is a unification of two opposites, a unification of the duality. Seeing and comprehending that there are two different aspects that work together and finding the line in between. So regardless of what the duality is, the middle path is an understanding and walking on that balance. So what does life look like when you're walking in the balance of the conscious mind and the subconscious mind? What does life look like when you balance those two? What would it look like for you specifically right now, with the clothes that you're wearing, with the situations that you have in your life right now? What does life look like if you're walking the balance between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind? When you're able to freely communicate between those two, what does that look like for you? Christian Black says, I feel like Ahsoka Tano is a high priestess. Absolutely. Absolutely. If you guys know me, I don't really watch TV, but Shango convinced me to watch that show. It's very good. It's laced with all kinds of occult stuff. I like it. I'm not very far in it. I think I'm on the 4th episode, but so far so good. I think that they do a good job so far at explaining, or I should say representing, what it's like to have psychic abilities and working with energy, like the way that she can hear things that happen in a particular area, or the way that her Padawan had a bad feeling before those droids came and invaded her home. You know, that was like her intuition telling her that something was up. But usually when you haven't fully developed your psychic abilities, your intuition tries to communicate with you. But like I said about the language and the communication system, if you don't have a communication system with your subconscious mind, you'll get that bad feeling, but you won't know what it's about. Extremely important to understand symbology, to have your library of correspondences and really understand what your subconscious mind is trying to communicate with you. When it comes to intuition and psychic ability, this is just another fancy, fun, exciting word for what I mentioned before, walking that balance between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. Psychic ability and intuition has to do with your subconscious trying to communicate with your conscious mind. But again, if you don't have the language, if you can't speak that language, then the communication is you can only guess, right? A lot of people ignore their intuition, and that mainly is because they don't have a solid communication. And the reason that we get a feeling instead of like a clear message is because this communication is coming from a higher level. I mentioned about unconditioned consciousness coming down into the mental plane and then coming down into the astral plane. Well, when it hits that astral plane, this is that raw feeling that you're getting. This is an astral impression that you're getting. The next level beneath the astral plane is what? Somebody tell me. What's right underneath the astral plane? Anybody tell me why we died? Okay, well, I know there's a delay, but I'm sure somebody's going to give me the right answer. Right underneath the astral plane is the etheric plane. So when your subconscious mind attempts to communicate with you, the easiest way to do so is through the astral plane. So it's going to give you an emotional impression. It's going to apply emotional pressure to you. You're going to get a feeling. Not a physical 5 sense feeling, but some type of inner emotional feeling. So we've got the astral plane and the physical plane, and right in between those two is the etheric plane. And this is your realm of imagination. This is the collection of all the pressure from above, condensed into symbols. And that should show you why it's so important to have a library of correspondences, because if you don't have a language, if that etheric plane, if your imagination isn't filled with correspondences that you understand, if it isn't filled with symbols connected to concepts and emotions, then when your subconscious mind attempts to communicate with you through the astral, you're not going to know how to interpret it. Your imagination should be filled and constructed and ordered even chaos, because IDKDKDF says that if chaos is order unrecognized, then everything is always in order, for lack of better words. Even if your imagination is chaotic, you should have symbols that mean something to you. Everything in your imagination should have a meaning. So when that subconscious mind talks to you through the astral, it will translate into an actual message. See, when we deal with the imagination, and we'll get to this in the book read, the next book actually, he gives you different practices to strengthen your etheric body. But there's two ways to deal with this imagination. You're either casting your imagination and you're putting these thoughts and these symbols out, or you're sitting back and receiving these impressions. A lot of people say that there's the difference between prayer and meditation is that prayer is you asking and talking to God, and meditation is you listening and receiving. Well, there's a lot of truth to that, right? So when we're dealing with our imagination, there's one aspect of giving our subconscious mind stuff to deal with, and then there's the other aspect of receiving what the subconscious mind has to say to us. That's why when you sit still and meditate, images begin to come up and arise. You're starting to hear and observe the bubblings and the gurglings of the subconscious, of the astral, of the things that are stored in your auric field. Most of us are addicted to being stimulated with our five senses, so we rarely take the time to sit down and listen to what our subconscious mind is actively trying to tell us. We rarely take the time to sit down and observe these astral bubblings. That's why when you sit down and go to sleep, you have these dreams, these vivid dreams. For most of us, the dreams are taking place in the etheric, but they are stimulated by the pressure of the astral plane. Fields says, I watched The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar today, and it was basically the first few chapters of Dharana Darshan. I've never heard of that. The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar? Never heard of that. I'll have to look that up. Carrera says, when is the next book reading and what book? So, pretty consistently, we're doing the book readings on Saturday evenings. And that's 8 p.m. Eastern Time. We are currently reading a trilogy of books by W.E. Butler. The first one we just finished reading was Magic, Its Ritual Power and Purpose. We're currently reading The Magician, His Training, and His Training and Work. So The Magician, His Training and Work is the current book. Peace, Kevin Wise. Capri says the subconscious mind is in a place where time and space doesn't exist, just the present moment. Absolutely. Hazard Pie says, been making my own oracle cards, been trying to learn the symbols my subconscious uses to communicate with me. It's actually helping me learn to interpret some of my dreams too, I think. That's awesome. That's an awesome way to build your library of correspondences. Perfect. If anyone else is artistic, I would highly recommend doing that as well. I generally don't like to buy or deal with oracle cards. And it's mainly for that reason, because they're intensely personal. You have a collection of symbols and themes that occur in your life repeatedly. So it would be a great idea to make your own oracle cards. peace. Zero says, I have a question. I think that karma doesn't exist as long as you don't believe in it. That means that any belief that you have can become real for you, even if it's not true. Living illusion in a illusion. So, like I said at the beginning of this video, in order to discuss that, we'd have to talk about your definition of karma. Because what you're referring to doesn't sound like my definition of karma. So we'd have to really come to an understanding of the same word. My understanding of karma isn't really something you have a choice about. It is another word for action and reaction, right? The fact that I have a thought and I send that stimulus to my throat and my mouth and words come out, that's karma. So to say that that doesn't exist, I don't know. I couldn't really, it'd be hard to calculate that. The heart beating and pushing blood through the veins, that's karma. That's the word to describe that is karma. Going to the gym to burn calories and then actually losing weight, that's karma. Picking up this coffee mug and drinking coffee, that's karma. But if you're talking about a reward system of good versus evil, then I would say, yeah, that's an aspect of culture. That's an aspect of group thought and the social desire to belong to a concept. We all have an inner social desire to belong to a concept, and that's what I said the energy of the stomach chakra, the Manipura chakra, is this desire to belong to a concept. Why? It's because we all seek identity, because we don't know who we are. We have a sense that we are something, but we don't know. And if we don't know who we are, then how can anyone else know? It becomes very easy for us to be manipulated when we don't know who and what we are. We seek and search for identity. And when I say we, what I'm really talking about is this ego, this function of ego, which is the I am. And like I said earlier, this I am is a different entity from ultimate God. This I am is the very thing that its core programming is. I am something different from that. I am something different from my environment. I am something different from you. Its core programming is this distinction. Its core programming is discernment. Now, when it's out of balance, like most people, it becomes a self-serving programming that utilizes the energies that we talked about earlier in a very selfish way. It's the ego, it's the I am function in our programming that causes us to fear for our survival and for our safety, that causes us to be addicted to sensory pleasures, that causes us to seek and desire to be a part of a concept, a group, a label. This is why in yoga and tantra it talks so much about harmonizing and integrating the ego and understanding the ego, because when left unchecked, it has a tendency to separate itself from everything else. JD says karma is your subconscious, unconscious reaction to your conscious, and the unconscious is the macrocosm. Christian Black says, yeah, because why would one have to say I am if they are? It's like proving what doesn't need to be proved, right? Exactly. That's why I said that it's a different entity. There's no need to say I am. What says I am is the ego, because it is not. And everything created by the ego has a foundation of illusion. We don't own our work. We don't own our world. We don't own anything at all. The ego tells us we do. The ego says this is mine. The ego says don't use my art in AI programming. The ego says don't plagiarize my work. Maya is the illusion. Maya is illusion. My is the illusion. I didn't say anything about right or wrong. I didn't say it's right to plagiarize or it's wrong to do this. I didn't say that. What I am saying is that the function of claiming, labeling, that's ego. Birdman says, what is astral projection? Astral projection is the process of intentionally applying pressure in the astral plane, intentionally applying pressure at a subconscious level of mind that operates behind ego, that operates behind the conscious will. So in other words, you can apply pressure to someone directly through conversation, or you can apply pressure to someone subtly, emotionally. And that type of work can be classified as astral projection. No, I didn't say flying around in the astral plane in an astral body, because, that paints an image of being somewhere. But the astral plane isn't so much of a somewhere as a somehow. It's not a place. It's a state of consciousness. It's a state of consciousness. So in order to effectively astral project, you've got to come into an understanding of your state of consciousness that operates at that level of emotional pressure. So I could sit here on this YouTube and talk and share all these logical explanations of the magical practice. But for you to really learn this stuff, you'll have to have an experience of it. You'll have to have an astral experience of it. Like I can say, write down on a piece of paper all the things that you wish to overcome, and then put it on the ground and step over it. And then that'll communicate to your subconscious mind that you're overcoming the things that hold you back. I can tell you that, but it isn't until you actually get into trance and do it that you'll have an experience and that'll make sense. And then you'll affect yourself on the astral plane because you put yourself into that emotional state and caused change. That's astral projection. And guess what? It can affect others, whether near or far, because the astral plane is not a place, it's a state. And it's a state of consciousness that all of us are connected to. It's a shared state. And this is why it's so important for the people who create media to have control over the symbols that they use. That's why they give you the sexy red and the whoever else. Because these people, when you listen to their music, it causes you to feel a certain way, doesn't it? When you put on their music and you get together with your people and you start singing the Coochie Pink Booty Hole Brown song, everybody feels a certain kind of way. It stimulates a feeling. That is astral manipulation. It's emotional manipulation. And you cannot behave or act outside of the state that you're in. So if you're listening to that music on a consistent basis and it's keeping you in a state, you can only behave in the parameters of that state. So think about that for a moment. I love it. Peace, Louis. Louis says people really feel fearful right now because of that Israel stuff. Yeah, it's true. But those same people are going to be fearful when the next thing comes out and the next thing and the next thing. These same people that are affected now, of course I got to watch my words because I don't want to be canceled. Oh no, I was just been canceled. The same people who have nothing to do with that particular event but are getting emotionally wrapped up in it are the same people who have a track record of being emotionally influenced by things that have nothing to do with them. So the same people that have nothing to do with this conflict and are emotionally wrapped up in it have a track record of being emotionally manipulated by things that don't concern them. It's just one thing and a closet of many. Peace, Animali. Vincent El Cristol says that hi-hat is a powerful tool. Absolutely. Like Morse code to the subconscious mind. Written in clay, peace. Gilly Suit 047, peace, peace. Lucid Reality asks, what is chaos energy? We could say that chaos energy is tapping into the unknown and the unpredictable. And what makes it so powerful is that it allows your subconscious mind to give you answers that are not premeditated, that are not precalculated. The beauty of chaos energy is that when you approach it, you don't know what to expect. This is great because, like I said, it gives your subconscious mind the freedom to express the correct answer. And to be quite honest, if you ever feel stuck, that's the type of energy you want to turn to. Unfortunately, what happens is that when most people are going through a hard time, they fall back on things that their conscious mind tells them is going to work, right? So if a person starts to become short on cash, they might lose their job, things aren't working out. The outside world is telling them you need to do something now. 1111, cool. The outside world is telling them that, hey, this worked in the past, or this sounds like it'll work, let's do that. And it's going to keep giving you these options that your heart isn't really feeling, but you're doing it out of desperation. That's not chaos energy. That's the opposite. That's playing by the Matrix's rules, right? Making a decision that you didn't want to make and your heart not being in it. And what happens is that when you get back on your feet, you start to realize that now you got a new set of problems to deal with because you agreed to something that wasn't a part of your mission. Dealing with chaos energy, what you're doing now, and this is why it's so much better, is that you're forcing the highest aspect of yourself to reach down and help. Now, I'm not saying, oh, please, God, please save me from this disaster. What I'm saying is that if you use chaos energy right, if you use it correctly, you can create an answer that the conscious mind didn't think of. Just think about it. If you're in trouble, the conscious mind is going to give you all the options that it already knows. And most of those options suck, which is why you didn't take them before. You're only relying on them now because you don't like the discomfort of being uncertain. But if you apply pressure to that subconscious mind and massage out of it an answer, it's going to be something that you didn't consider before. This is where genius comes from. This is where creativity comes from. Having the ability to harness the so-called chaos of the unconscious mind to give you an answer. And it's typically going to be an answer that you didn't think of before. That's one of the ways that I got out of my recent funk, my recent low point. I began to work with my unconscious mind. I didn't know what to do. I tried everything. So in a matter of words, I allowed my unconscious, I did a couple of rituals, and I allowed my unconscious mind to provide for me a solution that I wouldn't have been able to think of. And it usually it's a snowball effect. It's not simply, here's the answer, go do it. It usually starts as something that you didn't really think of before. For me, the first step that my subconscious mind told me to do was go clean your room. Go clean. Go scrub everything. Go organize everything. Just go clean up. And I'm thinking to myself, well, that's not very spiritual. That doesn't sound like it's the answer, but I followed. And what I found was that it allowed me a moment to really get out of just sleeping or sitting at my computer all day. It gave me a moment to move around and do things, and it caused thoughts to circulate. And as I'm looking around at some of these books that I hadn't seen in a while, and finding stuff that I haven't really thought of in so long, this began to stimulate new ideas. And then that led to something else, that led to something else, that led to something else, and the next thing I know, I'm doing a whole lot better than I was before. So it's very important to be able to have some way to allow your unconscious mind, your subconscious mind, to give you an answer that you didn't expect. It isn't really channeling if you're premeditating what to say. When you're channeling the forces of the unconscious, it's usually going to be something that you didn't expect. Let me know if that answered your question. It took me 6 minutes to answer it. So speaking about energy and manipulating the life force, there's different ways you can do it. And honestly, I prefer with working what is available, right? If you know that there are certain symbols that appear in your life on a consistent basis, then it's time for you to program these symbols with meanings so that it causes a different reaction state within you. Classic example is how I talk about spiders, right? And how when I was much younger, I had a fear of spiders. Now, spiders aren't going anywhere. They are citizens of this domain, just like we are. Instead of trying to isolate myself from spiders, I simply changed the definition in my mind. It took some time, but I literally reprogrammed what spiders mean to me. And in doing so, now when I see a spider, it gives me that emotional spike, but the message is different. So one of the primary ways to begin manipulating this life force that is inherent in all living things is to begin to make sure that you have solid definitions that benefit you for every experience. To the isolated mind, every experience that we encounter in life is its own entity. Every experience is its own entity. This broadcast right here is an entity. It's a life force. You going to work, that's an entity. Your relations with your partner, that's an entity. You playing the video game, that's an entity. And if you symbolize it as such, because it's an entity to your subconscious mind, when you symbolize it as such, now you can work with it and communicate with it in a way that benefits you, instead of just having it do whatever. I say to the isolated mind. But what happens when you start playing around with magic long enough is the inevitable threshold of the Oath of the Abyss. Right? The Oath of the Abyss. And what happens when you cross that threshold of the Oath of the Abyss is you realize that all along, this was only a communication conversation between me and my soul. That's it. There ain't no other people. There ain't no other situations that are isolated entities. It's all a conversation between me and my soul. So when you get to that point, you realize that the different events in your life are just different aspects of this one conversation. I'm talking to myself right now, right? Everything that we do. There isn't any private time or public time. There isn't like behind closed doors. Everything, the shower, using the bathroom, all of it is a conversation between you and your soul. When you reach that level and you literally cross that threshold, life becomes different. So no longer is it synchronicity. Oh, 11:11, how cool. That's just another part of the conversation. And you learn to speak back. This is why it's so important to build your library of correspondences. Like I said, this imagination, that's the meeting place of the physical plane and the astral plane. So your imagination should be filled with constructed symbols, or symbols that have definitions, symbols that are connected with specific emotions, symbols that are connected with specific things. So whenever the life presents you with a scenario, you'll understand what the soul is saying to you. And that's when you really start to see that there aren't separate people. It's all one soul. You'll start to see that there are no enemies. This is all a conversation. But before you get to that point, before you reach the Oath of the Abyss, before you cross that barrier, then the way that your subconscious mind works is that every event, every experience is its own entity. And you work with it as such until they all combine into one unified force. Lessange Descote, peace. Framestar Film says, cleaning your room is the beginning of spiritual practice. It's a cleansing process in itself. Absolutely. Absolutely. And at the time, I'm looking for this revelation, but I get this very mundane answer, and I followed it, and it led to very spiritual places. So I'm the type of person who, if I'm going to ask the subconscious mind something, that means I expect an answer. And if I get an answer, then I'm going to run with it. I'm not going to reshuffle the deck and try to get a different reading. You guys ever do that? You pull out some cards that you don't like, and then you put them back like you didn't do it, and reshuffle and try to get a different reading? That's not how it works, man. If you're going to do that, you might as well not even do the cards. Peace. Cizia Zyke says, are you gonna read one day The Sun of Knowledge? I haven't heard of that book. I don't know what that is. Anna Molly says, my kid heard the live stream and went for the unicorn toy. Might be programming them, LOL. Uh-oh. Capri says, so is the ego the known that has been experienced with the five senses and the subconscious the unknown? Yes, absolutely. Somebody's been reading their books. The ego is composed of entirely the memory of what the five senses have picked up and the emotions associated with them. It takes all that data all that raw data, and creates an I am out of that, right? Here's the thing. You are God. You're God experiencing matter. And what happens is that all this data that you have experienced, you look at it and you say, I am separate from this data. I am something separate from all of this data. That's the creation of the ego. And that happens as a baby. That happens as a little baby. I am separate from this data that I've collected. That's the beginning of the ego. I am that I am a different entity. Hey. And over the years, that process of collecting data and distinguishing self from not self, what happens is that that process becomes more and more complex, and it becomes this structure that we create, this structure of good and evil, the structure of rules, right? We create a framework for ourselves naturally. And regardless of whether or not the framework gives us the results we want, we do not abandon our programming. This is what builds personalities. For example, as a baby, an only child may have learned that if they cry and they scream and kick and throw a fit, they'll get what they want, right? If they cry, scream, throw a fit, their parents will come and give them the bottle. Then as they get older, cry, scream, and throw a fit, the parents will give them the toy. Then they become adults. That doesn't leave their system. They've learned in their framework that if they cry, scream, and throw a fit, they'll get what they want. Even if they haven't gotten what they wanted in 20 years, the programming is still there. We are creatures of habit. We are creatures that are addicted to our programming. So this is why shadow work is so important. You have to become aware of your programming before you can reprogram. As Funkadelic says, program, deprogram, reprogram. Collection of data. So notice this oath of the abyss. I mean, that's how you start in life. A baby doesn't know the difference between things. It's just there experiencing the world. But as the days pass, as the nipple is sucked, the baby begins to distinguish itself from mother. It begins to distinguish its body from its environment. And that process builds upon itself. You literally have to tear all that down before you become enlightened. All that framework and structure must be destroyed. That's the death. That's the first death. And if you survive that, you now have the option to recreate that in a way that suits you. But that's something that takes a lot of determination, focus, discipline. And when I say discipline, what I'm talking about is the ability to endure the appearance of pain, the threat of pain, the ability to endure the challenges to these energies that I mentioned, the challenges to the energy of survival, the challenges to the energy of creation and sex, the challenges to the energy of being a part of a group. You got to be able to endure those challenges before you successfully activate that fourth chakra, the heart chakra. Because when you start to reach those levels of the heart chakra, you start to turn away from the pain and the fear of death and towards the understanding that we are all immortal beings. We all have access to immortality. It's the ego which does not. It's the ego which does not. And like we just said, the ego is a creation that has been formed by the data collected by the five senses and the memory of that data collection. That must die. Because the physical body is temporary, so the ego dies along with that physical body. However, what you actually are was never born and will never die. What you actually are is the whole point of why we're doing this magic in the first place. That's why I said you have to completely destroy and tear down that ego and allow the soul to rebuild it. You have to allow the soul to rebuild that structure. And it would behoove you to do that before you have to do that. It's much more difficult when you have no choice but to do that on the spot, right? Angelo Scott says, so animism kind of got it right then. Absolutely. And you'll notice that most of the earlier cultures that are recorded were animists. That was like one of the earliest forms of spiritual practice. Before the cults came along, before the cult of Islam and the cult of Christianity and the cult of Judaism came along, the entire planet was working on a level of dealing directly with the subconscious mind. Directly with the subconscious mind. But then the cults of power came and transformed the human experience. Completely transformed the human experience. Now, what these religions have done is given us pre-packaged concepts, thought forms, and emotions. It's giving us, these religions have come to give us outlets for that internal energy to express itself. So no longer are we operating with the subconscious mind and creating our own symbols to experience life. We're born into a religion that gives us, this is how you're supposed to express your survival instinct. This is how you're supposed to express your creative sexual instinct. This is how you're supposed to create your social instinct, right? When you're part of the religion, you have to go to church and congregate, or the mosque or whatever. You have to, you're only allowed to express sexuality under marriage, right? We have this threat of the afterlife, the sin, right? That the whole threat of sin and that whole control scenario is built to manage the survival instinct. So nobody wants to go to hell. We don't want to get poked by the devil, whatever that may mean. It's given to us is what I'm saying. And that's what makes a good cult. A cult gives you these things to think and feel. That's why they've taken over the world in the way that they've done. That's why we're so deeply programmed by these cults. It's not Satanism or whatever modern thing these people are talking about. No, these major religions are some of the greatest mind control examples to ever be experienced. I mean, you look at what's going on right now. People fighting and dying for ideas that they didn't even come up with, that they don't even really understand, to keep it real with you. How many Christians do you know actually read the Bible and understand it? Muslims, they usually know their book, at least the ones I've met. Framestar Films says, as magicians, we have the opportunity to transmute the mundane into meaningful correspondences. We are conditioned to take many things for granted and therefore our own power. Absolutely. Absolutely. We all have access to immortality because that's what we are, an immortal soul. And we are all magicians. Just some know how to do it on purpose. Ramses P500 says, over-intellectualizing spirituality leads nowhere. Silence is one of the 4 great virtues for this reason. Yamaika, peace. Angelo Scott says, when I dive into my subconscious mind, I keep seeing this feminine identity that kind of looks like some Hindu goddess, but she's pitch black with red eyes. No idea what's the meaning behind it. I would say definitely pay attention to how this makes you feel. I would sit in meditation more and concentrate on this symbol and see what it represents to you. What else does it represent to you? You might not find a name. You might have to give it a name. But the important thing is to understand what is behind it. What does it represent? Angelo Scott says, mine's got red hair and her skin is dark purple. She is Kali Ma. Ramses P500 says, there are esoteric branches of Christianity and Islam. Don't confuse it as cults. Church and mosque is more like elementary school, whereas Sufi orders, where ceremonial rites are frequent, is uni. Absolutely. And it's great that you understand that. So really, what we're dealing with these cults and these organizations of control is that, as we've talked about before on this channel plenty of times, I think you might be new here, we've got the esoteric and we've got the exoteric. And the exoteric, the outer, of course, deals with the general public. And this is definitely where we have the cult behavior. And then there's the esoteric, which understands the principles behind why these rules are given, why these pre-packaged expressions of the life force is presented to us. There's a reason why Christianity talks about celibacy before marriage. There's a reason why Christianity talks about sin and these other things. The general public, for the most part, doesn't have the capacity to understand the deeper level, so they're given these pre-packaged concepts because it's easy. In short, I think W.E. Butler said it best in his book, The Magician, His Training and Work. He talked about how when we're dealing with the exoteric, this is an individual's approach to God from without, whereas the esoteric is a person's approach to God from within, looking inward towards God or looking outwards towards God. But when we're speaking on a general level, dealing with the general public, it's not going to be anything deep. It's going to be extremely surface level, basic, and really as a control mechanism. Framestar Film says, you're provided with the map to follow blindly, but if you pay attention and look where you're going, you realize the map is not the territory. That's great. You're provided with the map. You're told and given these pre-packaged experiences and how to react to them. But you look closely and you realize the map is just a piece of paper. The experience of being in the landscape is totally different. Christian Black says, I recently got this book on the original Aramaic words of Jesus. It's fire. So much has been mistranslated to try to fit people into control schemes. Absolutely. Absolutely. Because on top of the original scheme, then you have people that come in and understand how to profit off of these organizations, which in turn causes more people to see how to profit on these organizations. And this manipulation of these organizations creates what we have today. All right. Peace, MC Maestro. Peace, love, and be. IDKDKDF says some map makers are known for putting imaginary spots or completely omitting spots from maps. Yeah, facts. Which is why the best experience to have, if your goal is understanding, is to go forth and make your own. So we discussed manipulating the life force. We discussed the different types of energies below the heart chakra at least. Do you think that that came through clear? Do you think that there was information learned here tonight? Christian Black says, thanks for this live, brother. I'm going to peace out. I really appreciate you and the evolution you've traversed. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Well, I hope that this resonated. I hope that this made sense. I hope that you got some ideas and some things that you're going to try for yourself. Stay tuned. Like I've mentioned before, I've got a new class that will be coming out at the end of this month. And I've mentioned before that I went through a very low period past couple of months, and it took me a lot to get out of it. And I really learned some powerful things that I will be including in this course, especially if you're somebody who, like me, felt like I was doing my best. You know, I was meditating, doing my reading, everything was going right. And then I stopped paying attention. I found myself at a low state where I wasn't doing any of that work, where I was feeling depressed. And I really was having trouble getting out of it. If you've ever felt that way and you've successfully made it through, there are some lessons that definitely can be used. One of the main lessons that I got from that period that I'll be teaching about in my class is that while all of this lovely language is awesome, and I'm talking about all these different frameworks and concepts, see, the reason I'm talking about the 5 frameworks is because that was gonna be the course. But I realized, this is something I told my brother, because every now and then my brother would tell me about what's going on in pop culture. And I always say to him, like, we are emotional creatures. We're not logical. So even though people do things that doesn't make logical sense, it's not that they're stupid, it's because we are emotional people. And I realized that these 5 frameworks, while it's true and it works, it's extremely logical. So I'm going to teach it here, and I'm teaching it in the membership. But what I learned was that for this course, I didn't want to just put a bunch of data. I wanted to create something where people can have this emotional experience and really understand how to tap into their power. So more information on that as we get closer to it. Think group rituals, if you will. But anyways, stay tuned for that. And I'll be seeing you guys on Saturday. We've got the book read. I think we're on chapter 3. And this book is The Magician, His Training and Work. We will be continuing with this on Saturday. That's in 3 days, 2 days, 8 o'clock Eastern time. All right. Cool beans. As always, I hope you're having a wonderful night, and keep studying. We got this new podcast going, me and Apollo Soul, Tuesday nights. So if you haven't seen that, we just released 2 episodes. Go ahead and check that out. We'll be pretty consistent on these Tuesday evenings. Also, I did a podcast with Universal Mastery. I did an episode. If you didn't see that, I'd recommend checking that out. We drop a lot of gems. The main part of it was about the clip-off, but we touched on a lot of different things. Check that out as well. And I think that's about it. All right, everybody have a good night. This is TK Trav, aka Travis Magus, here with LVX777. I love you all. Peace.